just want to apologize and say that I'm so sorry for all of these theories. I never meant to hurt anyone. Never meant to offend anyone. Didn't mean to scare anyone. I'm so sorry. I'm also really sorry that I didn't bring any Kleenex because my nose is running like a mofo right now. So to anyone who I've ever offended... What was that?
Imagine you're at a yard sale on a Saturday morning in the summer of 1999. Tables covered in the usual artifacts of other people's lives. Lamps, dishes, old board games with missing pieces. And then, at the end of a folding table, a plain black VHS tape, a label, handwritten in permanent marker, that reads simply, Blair Witch. October 1994, you pick it up. Something about it makes you pause. Not fear exactly. Something you can't name. You pay $1 and take it home. That night, alone in your living room, you press play. What you watch over the next 81 minutes will disturb you in a way you will not be able to explain to anyone who wasn't there. Not because of what you see, but because of what you cannot stop believing. What if it was real? This is the story behind one of the most successful and psychologically sophisticated works of mass deception in the history of cinema. And the question it raised, the one that millions of people took home with them from darkened theaters in the summer of 1999, has never been fully answered. Not why they believed it, but why they wanted to. The Blair Witch Project was shot in 8 days in the woods of Seneca Creek State Park in Maryland. The total production budget was $60,000. It would earn nearly $250 million worldwide. Two first-time directors, Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick, had a concept simple enough to describe in a single sentence. 3 student filmmakers disappear into the Black Hills forest while making a documentary about a local legend, and this is the footage they left behind. There was no traditional script. The 3 lead actors, Heather Donahue, Joshua Leonard, and Michael Williams, were given a loose outline of events and sent into the woods with cameras and a basic framework. Each day, while the actors slept, the directors left directions at predetermined coordinates. The actors would find them and improvise accordingly. They were cold. They were genuinely disoriented. They were given progressively less food as the shoot continued to maintain a baseline of real physical discomfort. The fear on Heather Donahue's face in the final act of the film is not entirely performed. By the last day of shooting, she later said, the line between the character and herself had become difficult to locate. That disorientation was, of course, entirely intentional. When Sanchez and Myrick began editing, sorting through approximately 19 hours of raw material, they understood that what they had made was either going to be dismissed as a student film with pretensions, or it was going to need something more: context, infrastructure, something that existed outside the frame of the film itself, pressing quietly but firmly on the audience's sense of reality before they ever sat down in a theater. What they built instead was something the entertainment industry had never attempted at scale. Months before theatrical release, something unusual began appearing across the early internet. Missing persons flyers, printed in the plain, institutional style of actual law enforcement documents. 3 names: Heather Donahue, Joshua Leonard, Michael Williams. 3 photographs, a description of their last known movements. A date, October 1994. A location, the Black Hills Forest, Burkittsville, Maryland. The flyers said the 3 were missing, presumed dead. At the same time, the Internet Movie Database, one of the most authoritative film resources in existence, listed all 3 actors under their real names as missing, presumed dead. Not as performers in a film, as people, as actual human beings who had walked into a forest and not come back. What the people sharing those flyers did not know, what most of the internet did not know, was that Heather Donahue was sitting in her apartment in Los Angeles. Joshua Leonard was working a part-time job. Michael Williams was very much alive. Their faces were circulating as missing persons. They had no idea. Film students at the University of Central Florida received a package in the mail. Inside, a police report, 8mm footage, evidence bags containing a journal and a tooth. None of it was real. Every piece had been fabricated by the filmmakers and their distributor, Artisan Entertainment, but the people who opened that package did not know that. Not yet. A mock documentary aired on the Sci-Fi Channel weeks before the theatrical release, presenting the disappearances as documented fact. Fan websites, dozens of them, built by people who believed they were contributing to a true case, constructed elaborate timelines of the Blair Witch legend. A woman named Ellie Kedwood banished from the town of Blair in 1785. 7 children who vanished the following winter. A hermit named Rustin Parr, who, in the 1940s, abducted and murdered 8 children in the woods, 2 at a time, in a basement. All of it fabricated. All of it presented as historical record. All of it believed. By the time audiences sat down in darkened theaters that July, the machinery had been running for months. Early screenings were prefaced with a single statement, delivered without qualification. The footage you are about to watch was recovered in the woods near Burkittsville, Maryland. No one mentioned it was a film. Theater employees at selected screenings had been quietly instructed. If anyone asks whether this is real, do not answer. Say nothing. Let them sit with it, and for a significant portion of the audience, that uncertainty never fully resolved. They left the theater not knowing. Some of them drove home in silence. Some of them called friends who hadn't seen it yet and told them not to go alone. And some of them, perhaps more than the studio ever anticipated, preferred not knowing, because not knowing meant the alternative was still possible. The town of Burkittsville, Maryland, had a population of approximately 200 people in 1999. By August of that year, it was receiving thousands of visitors per week. They came looking for the forest. They came looking for the signs. Some of them came looking for evidence, actual physical evidence, that something had happened there. Townspeople reported strangers knocking on their doors at midnight, asking for directions to the Black Hills. The population sign at the town limits was stolen so many times that the mayor eventually stopped replacing it. Welcome to Burkittsville signs disappeared within days of installation. Local residents were not amused. One resident, interviewed by the Washington Post that summer, described the experience with a directness the filmmakers probably did not anticipate when they chose the town as their setting. The people who came, she said, were not interested in being told it wasn't real. They had decided something before they arrived, and no amount of correction was going to move them. A few of them, she said, would stand at the edge of the tree line at the outskirts of town and just stare into the woods, not speaking, not moving, just looking. She paused before she said the last part. I always knew those woods were wrong. I just didn't know everyone else could feel it too. Here is where the story becomes something other than a marketing case study. The Appalachian region, the range of forested mountains running from Alabama to Maine, passing directly through Maryland, and the terrain the film used as its backdrop, has one of the highest rates of unexplained wilderness disappearance in the United States. Hiker gone in clear weather, no body recovered, no distress signal, no trace of equipment. One case, documented in National Park Service files and later investigated by independent researchers, involved an experienced hiker who set out on a solo trip through the Catoctin Mountain area, fewer than 40 miles from Burkittsville. He was found 4 days later, alive, barefoot, unable to account for 3 of the 4 days he had been missing. He was not the only one. Researchers who have documented disappearances across the Appalachian Range note a pattern that has never been satisfactorily explained. Experienced outdoorsmen, people who do not get lost, vanishing in good conditions, in areas with established trails, within range of cell service that should have functioned. Some never recovered. Some recovered with gaps in memory they could not fill and did not, in interviews, seem particularly eager to. The Blair Witch Project did not invent the idea that something is wrong in those woods. It just gave that feeling a name. The film's central historical villain, the hermit Rustin Parr, who the mythology describes as having abducted and murdered children in a basement in the 1940s, was entirely fictional. His method, as outlined in the constructed legend, was specific. He would make one child stand in the corner while he killed the other, so that the surviving child would not see what was happening. He believed this protected him, that looking away created a barrier between the act and the witness. No such person existed, no such murders occurred, but a man with a strikingly similar psychology did exist, and he operated during almost exactly the same era. Albert Fish was a mild-mannered grandfather from New York who confessed, before his execution in 1936, to the murders of at least 3 children, and claimed a number closer to 100. His letters to the families of his victims are among the most disturbing documents in the history of American criminal justice. Psychiatrists who examined him before trial concluded that he experienced no recognizable guilt and appeared to view his acts as a form of ritual purification. He had lived quietly among ordinary people for decades. Neighbors described him as gentle. He brought food to elderly women on his street. The filmmakers invented Rustin Parr. Albert Fish was real, and he was worse. There is a question that no review of the Blair Witch Project has ever fully answered. Not why so many people believed it was real, but why so many people wanted to. In August of 1999, the Burkittsville Police Department began receiving calls from across the country. Not threats, not complaints, inquiries. People asking with apparent sincerity whether the investigation into the missing students was still ongoing, whether there had been any developments, whether anyone had gone back into the woods. The officers who answered those calls confirmed the same thing every time. There were no missing students. There had never been missing students. The film was a film. Some callers thanked them and hung up. Others argued. On early film forums, the message boards that predated social media, where the internet's first wave of movie discussion was happening, threads appeared within days of the release, hundreds of posts long, people passing footage frame by frame, cross-referencing the constructed mythology with real Maryland historical records, presenting their findings as evidence. When other users pointed out that the film had a credited director, a production company, a distribution deal, the response was often the same. That's what they want you to think. Psychologists who studied audience response in the months following the release noted something the studio had not anticipated. When the fiction was definitively confirmed, when the actors appeared on late-night television, alive and visibly well, laughing about the experience, a measurable portion of the viewing audience reported not feeling relieved. They reported feeling disappointed. That response is worth sitting with. There is something in human psychology that does not reach instinctively toward comfort and resolution. It reaches toward mystery, toward the possibility that the world contains things we have not yet explained and cannot yet categorize, toward the suggestion that the dark, the genuine, unlit, indifferent dark, might be more populated than we have allowed ourselves to believe. The Blair Witch Project did not succeed because it frightened people. It succeeded because it offered them something rarer and more seductive than fear. It offered them the possibility that the woods, dense, silent, ancient, might be watching back. And for a brief, suspended moment in the summer of 1999, millions of ordinary people in ordinary living rooms decided that was a possibility they could live with, that they might even prefer. Ellie Kedward never existed. Rustin Parr never existed. The recovered footage was never recovered because it was never lost. But the forest outside Burkittsville is real. The disappearances along the Appalachian Range are real. The hiker who came back with 3 days he couldn't account for is real. And somewhere, in the accumulated archive of things that were filmed and not explained, there is footage that no marketing team manufactured and no director staged. We just haven't found it yet. If you made it this far, thank you for watching and for keeping these stories alive. Make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because next time we're uncovering a true story even darker than this one. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and never forget to say thank you. Thanks for watching.